Hello, hello. Good afternoon. My name's Alisa Stovall. I'm with the IEP Technical Assistance Center, and I'm here with my colleague, Gail Ringwalt. And we want to welcome you to our afternoon session. There'll still be some time with folks coming in. That's just the nature of having meetings after school or after hours. And so we'll let some folks get in and settled. And let's see. As we get started, we want to make sure that as we share this information, you have the opportunity to have something in front of you if you wish. Some people want to sit and listen, some want to take notes. If you go to on the screen there, you'll see a QR code as well as a link. I'm not sure if you click on it live or not. I didn't try that this time. But you can put that in your browser, and this is where you'll find some materials, or all of the materials actually that we reference. And if we were going to spend 5 hours together, we would be giving you much more information than we're going to share out in the next hour. But the good news is you have available to you now all of the materials that are actually a part of this presentation and more. So feel free to pull up that information, have it printed off if you have the luxury of a printer close by. You can always come back to this Padlet. We do update it every once in a while with more resources, and we have a few minutes on the other end. We might talk a little bit about how that's going to work. So
also, you can, if you have questions during our next hour and a half, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. Please do ask questions. And if not, if you just want to put it in the chat, we will also be monitoring the chat. So put it there.
We'll do our best.
And, yeah. So that's what I can say about that. But yes, please unmute yourself as we go through and ask questions.
Yeah, you don't want to listen to us the whole time. Yep. Okay, and you're going to have to advance. Boy, you're just going to be taking on everything here because you've got the door. Unless you want me to, let's see.
I don't know why it's not there.
Did you make me a co-host? I'm not sure if you can.
Yeah, you're the host. I'm the co-host. No. So go ahead, but I'm sharing it, so I have to do it. So
yes. Okay, so here's where we're heading for the next little bit of time we have together. We're going to provide you an overview, and as I said a few minutes ago, if we had 5 hours together, it would be much more in depth. This truly will be an overview of the process of developing a behavior intervention plan, and that's our first charge. And the second one is equally important. We want to make sure that we provide you with strategies and resources so that you can take that information back, or at least you know where to find it if you want to come back and read through the information, or or take a second or third look at it. But it's all about, for us, creating opportunities in the school environment to maximize students' academic growth. We want to keep kids in instruction. We want them to be a part of the learning that's happening in classrooms. And if their behavior prevents that, that's pretty important. And so we're going to try to give you some information, and then also leave you with a lot of resources that you can come back to. So hopefully that can meet some needs for the folks in the room. And if there's anything else that you need of us, feel free to ask. You can put a response in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and close my, so I can see the whole screen now, and leave the doorbell to you.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the most important pieces of information that I think we sometimes share is that oftentimes in buildings, there's one person that kind of takes over this process of developing a behavior intervention plan, and it's really not a one-person task. There may be one person that's going to run point. It might be the teacher of record. It might be the school psychologist. It might be the SLP, depending on what district, what school, where you're working. That point person might have a different role other than being a part of the IEP meeting. But when you're ready to get the information and collect this information, you want to make sure that you have enough people to bring different perspectives to the work that we're going to do. Okay, so you ready? You got things up and going there, Gail?
I think so.
Okay, so I'm going to swing back around, and this process, whomever's going to take point on it, they're going to need people to support them, and you want to be aware that there's actually two pieces to developing a behavior intervention plan. You can't do one without the other. So first, we're going to talk about the process of the functional behavior assessment piece, and then we're going to move to the second part and talk a bit about the actual behavior intervention plan and the components that would be a part of that process. And as I started to share, you want to think about who can be a part of this team and who should be. Behavior intervention plans aren't just for students with IEPs. There's a mandate, and there's some legal requirements around that when you have a student with an IEP. But this process could be used with any student that has behavioral needs that we're concerned about in a school setting. So you want to think about team members that have various experiences with the student, not just those that get along really well, not with those that tend to have difficulty with the student. You want to have an equal range of folks that have had experiences with the student. You want to see how the student's doing across different settings. That's going to be important to your team. Having a multidisciplinary group, of course, is part of the Article 7 language, and that would be a requirement of who's involved in the process for, again, a student with an IEP. But for any student, you want to have people that both know the student well and those that perhaps don't know the student well, those who have had strong relationships, some who've had maybe rocky relationships with the student, because we want to be able to look at all sides of the behavioral concerns. You want to make sure you have the student voice.
Right. That's what I was going to say. The student voice is so important, and sometimes we leave the student to last.
Well, that's usually how it happens when the process is in place, that, oh yeah, we need to talk to the student. Sometimes that's a good place to begin. So student voice needs to be represented, whether in person or some other form of participation. If it's, of course, a student with an IEP, there'll be other members of a case conference committee that are part of this process, because the case conference committee makes the decisions about that student. And then there may be times that there's someone from the community or other people that might be appropriate to include. And I'm not sure if that was one of the slides that you took out, that next one. Oh, no, it was still in there, potential teammates.
Yep.
So take a look here. Bus drivers, paraprofessionals, sometimes, if there's an administrator that works more closely with students than the head of the school.
And
somebody that works in
also,
the cafeteria.
right. Sometimes some of these people, for instance, the bus driver, the cafeteria, secretaries, they see a lot, and kids aren't always paying attention when they're in the room. Cafeteria staff can observe a lot of things. And bus drivers have a whole different perspective than people actually in the school building. So kind of try to think outside the box when you're trying to collect information. Can anybody think of anybody that they've used that's not on one of our lists, that's not on this list, or we haven't talked about? Okay. If you think of somebody, let us know, because we're always open for suggestions.
Yes.
Can you share the QR code again?
Oh yeah, hold on.
And did you say the students have the students? You said, didn't you, have to be part of the BIP and FBA?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, as appropriate. Sometimes maybe the student won't come in and sit with the group, but you certainly want someone to go and get information and have an understanding of how the student sees the situation as well, or has some ideas for what are some ways to support you so that you can do well in class. So,
is that what you wanted?
QR code.
Okay, we're gonna also. Okay.
Yes.
There you go. Okay. So far we talked about it's a two-part process, and we've got to have a team. So
And again, I just have to reiterate, it has to be a team. One person can like write it, but it has to be a team that's collected data. It has to be a team. It can't be somebody assigned in your building to do functional behavior assessment.
No, you can't. You can churn them out, but if they're going to be effective, you really need to have a team that's looking at the student from different perspectives.
Right.
So, and that's best practice as well. It's just something that the ladies on the screen said. So, well, so let's start into that process a little bit now. So, it all begins with a behavior of concern, and we really need to think about. There's lots of different settings and school types and buildings and staffing groups. When we look at behavior, we want to be more consistent than not. So what kind of behaviors rise to the level of perhaps bringing them to your team? We would submit that anything that's removing the student from instruction so that they're no longer a part of the lesson, a part of the classroom, or sometimes even in the building. So that would be, a first. We need to dig a little deeper and find out why this behavior is occurring. We want to think about behavior that's harmful or dangerous to self or others, and that's pretty obvious. We see that one, pretty clearly. But we also want to think about behaviors that isolate the student from others. That can be an indicator that we need to provide some supports and teach some skills for a student. And then there are things that regularly interrupt your instructional flow. When you're in class, and if it's a start, stop, that's impacting the student and also many others. And that could bring the behavior to a team that rises to the level. And then the last one is more of an internal piece. If students are kind of pulling themselves off task, they get lost in thought, or they're upset about something and they're not able to calm and be in the classroom. That part of taking yourself away from instruction is equally important, as well as moving others away from the task at hand.
And one thing I will say about isolating the student from others, that can be something the student does that children find offensive.
Yep.
Maybe it's picking their nose, or maybe it's that they have body odor. It can be something that the student does to isolate themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, and those are learning. There's some pieces of that, like I need to shower, or hygiene. Sometimes that's a learning curve for kids, but there are also behaviors that are just unusual, or kind of odd, and they tend to push people away. That would be a concern as well, because school is a social event as well. One of the things that we would like to challenge you to take away from the session is to think about in a school, in a staff, in your division, in your wing, with your grade level team. What are you doing to make sure that you're addressing the same types of behaviors? Because there's a wide range. After 40 years working with kids with emotional and behavioral struggles, my tolerance, what I notice is out of the range of quote normal, might be quite different than a first or second year teacher. So we want you to think about, are we collectively labeling behaviors in the same way when it comes particularly to discipline referrals, which is sometimes where this process of behavior intervention begins. They're those kids that continue to get referrals. And so there's an activity that we would encourage you to take home, or to take back to your team, that helps you kind of define what does it mean when we say, he's hitting? Is it a hit, a slap, or a punch? Are they different? Are they the same? How are we going to label these behaviors so that we know what it is when we see it? Another piece of that we're going to do here is on the next slide. It gives us some. Whoops! No, I guess this one wasn't in there. Go back to the first, to the one before then. There's some language around how to make a behavior definition measurable. So if we want to talk about hitting, we talk using the terms of observable. The behavior has to be something that can be observed, okay? Something that can be seen. Okay? It has to be measurable. We should be able to get a count or a frequency or a level of quality or time that we can use to measure that behavior. How long did it last, for example? And then we need to make sure that the behavior is recognizable. And that just means that as soon as we say we're talking about hitting, everybody knows it when they see it. Everybody knows it when they see it. And that would be recognizable. Those are kind of the general definitions that you can put around behaviors that allow us to be able to really identify those behaviors of concern.
Right. So when people come often and they'll tell you that a kid is disruptive or non-compliant, but as Alisa pointed out, my definition of disruptive is probably, and my tolerance for what is disruptive is probably different than yours, Alisa's, whatever. So they're all different. And I can't really, everybody won't know what that looks like if I say the student is disruptive. So you have to be really clear and kind of hone down exactly what the behavior is.
Yeah. So we all know
to measure it. Right. So you know what it looks like. So I know teachers get frustrated when you ask them to be more specific, but you really do need to hone down to what exactly the behavior is.
And I would submit that if we take the a preemptive approach to this and say, okay, let's define what hitting is. Is it, it involves an open or closed hand. It involves, whatever the criteria are going to be, as long as they are observable, measurable, and we can recognize them. We all know it when we see it. Then we could be in agreement about what was happening, and you don't have that tension between, well, I didn't see it that way and he didn't and she did, and so all the referrals are coming from Alisa.
So the handout is in the Padlet for you to use if you'd like.
Yes, and it explains all of that. So we have a critical question that the case conference team has to address, which comes from thinking about defining the behaviors actually. And the first is pattern of behavior. And a pattern of behaviors, it has been defined for us in way back when we were developing the IEP system. We had to come up with something that was measurable. But repeated occurrences of behavior in one or more settings. Behavior occurs with a predictable series of triggers. So we're looking for sameness, same time of day, same activity, same pressures that the student seems to feel when, and articulate about something, same activity, same noise level. That would be part of a pattern of sameness. Okay. The second part of the definition is about that impeding learning, the learning of that student or other students. And so it turns into a question that actually is a part of Article 7, which talks about, go ahead and go
sorry.
forward.
Sorry.
The critical question is from Article 7 is, does the pattern of student behavior impede his or her learning or that of others? That's a pretty full statement. It could be that maybe not, we're not sure. Some things it's going to be quite clear. But if we're not sure that there's a pattern, we can just make an adjustment. So here's the behavior that's occurring. It happens when the student gets off the bus and moves towards into the building at the start of the day. Okay, so how about let's just change his path. He's not going to come in and go down the hallway. He's going to go up the stairs and take a different route. So he's with a different group of students. That might be enough to address the behavior that we're seeing. Okay, just a slight adjustment. We might want to put an accommodation in place. Okay, so now he's going to have a peer greeter at the bus that's going to walk with him and talk with him all the way into the building. That might be enough just to accommodate that way. Or we might just need to teach a specific skill, kind of coach a skill. If that could change the behavior, we wouldn't have to go to the whole process of a functional behavior assessment and a behavior intervention plan. What we want to do, if we really believe that there might be something we can try in the earlier stages of our concern, document it. Write out, this is what we're going to do, and document how it goes. That may be enough to address the behavior. If it is, congratulations. I'll keep supporting the student and moving forward. But if not, at the very least, we have data, more information now to consider if we're going to go down that path. So
Right.
document.
I would say that any of these things that Alisa has talked about here, adjustment, accommodations, or teaching, teachers do this all the time. You change a kid's seat. You talk about rules and expectations in your classroom. You really need to, for those kids that you think, this isn't really working, you need to keep the data. You need to write it down somewhere that I've tried this, it didn't work. I've tried this, it didn't work. I tried this, it did. Just so you have that data information. If in fact it goes above and beyond that and you need to come to this point here. So just keep that in mind, because I know teachers do a lot of things to help children with behavior, but we don't always write down what we do.
Yeah, get in the habit of just jotting it down somewhere that's private, jot it down, keep that information.
Right. And we also have to remember that we have to continually teach kids behavior, because oftentimes kids will know they're not supposed to hit somebody, whether it's an open slap or a balled up fist, but that doesn't mean that they understand what an alternative might be for them being angry. So we need to be constantly instructing.
Okay, got it. Looks like that document's not for the operational definitions, isn't on the Padlet.
Oh, it isn't?
So we'll have to make sure that it gets that. Or did we put it on the I'm not the behavior specialist one? Maybe
I don't know.
Yeah, but we can make. Yeah,
we'll check and make sure.
Yeah, make sure we get that on there.
Yep.
Thanks for letting us know, Shannon.
Okay. So again, support the accommodations and the specially designed instruction, like you're specifically teaching a student a specific skill. And then how effective was it? And again, you need to write it all down. We can't say enough how you need to keep data. It will, as we go through this, you'll understand that it can change everything if you have it. And it can really put you in a bad space if you don't. So it doesn't have to be pretty, just find somewhere, somehow, whatever works for you to keep track of the data.
So when we get to the place where we've really continue to have these concerns about this behavior, it's the case conference that answers that question. Is the student's behavior impeding his or her learning or that of others? And if the answer is yes, and again, that's a case conference decision. When I was an assistant principal, I didn't have a vote on my own saying, yes, this kid needs to have a plan. It had to go to the case conference. And then that's where, the decision is made. And once we make that decision, then that means, we've considered, it's time for us to put a plan in place that's about teaching skills, not about punishment, but about teaching skills.
Right.
And, I thought you were going to go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
And here's what's in the law. Okay, but we're not going to spend time. No, we're not going to spend time on the law.
But here is the law. If you want, this is straight from Article 7, that you have to identify a pattern and there has to be a purpose. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Alisa's just found it for you, so you can just look back through this instead of having to go through Article 7.
Yeah, not everybody loves to read the law. But we're going to conduct a functional behavior assessment. There are some requirements. The code on that it'll be on the slides, and the slides should be on the Padlet already with the Indiana code for it. See, someone else is appreciating the law too, Gail. So when to conduct an FBA? Most of the time it's when we're not sure why a behavior is occurring. And we can't assume that we know why a behavior is occurring either. Oh, he just wants attention. Oh, she just wants to, to have everybody watch what she does. No, we've got to look at, the function of the behaviors is what is driving that behavior to continue. And when we don't know, we do a functional behavior assessment so that we can determine that. There are times when it's part of Article 7, and it says we must do that. And the other thing is when you need new data to inform an existing behavior plan. When the plan stops working, we might need to address everything and take another look and see if there is something more. So we'll get new data.
Okay, so here's the important part of that last bullet. When new data is needed to inform an existing behavior intervention plan. Here's why it is so very important that you keep data. Because if you get to that case conference and you say, hey, we need to get some new data to tweak this behavior plan, a parent can say no. And if a parent says no, what you are left with is what existing data you have. What data you have as you're sitting in that meeting. You can use that. If the parent says no, you can't get new data. So you're going to have to keep going on with your old plan until such times as you can do that. So, yeah, that's why it's so important to keep data and have it available for all of those case conferences.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Oh, sorry, going the wrong way.
Well, and we've touched on this already.
Yep.
It's part of eligibility decisions. It's also attached to when there's a disciplinary action that we need to take or we're considering taking. We may have to make sure that we have an updated functional behavior assessment, or serious harm, weapons, drugs, serious bodily injury, those kinds of things happening. That will kind of trigger the process. If there's an interim alternative educational setting being considered. And then most importantly, just to inform development of a behavioral intervention plan, just so that we know where to focus our attention and time and resources. And here's the why.
Go ahead. Here's the why. Here's the why you need to understand the function of the behavior. This is an example. So you have a student, they come in, they're dancing around. So you say to the student, we're going to take your audience away. You're trying to get attention. We're going to put you out. If the function of that behavior was to get out of class, you have just strengthened that behavior. So it's important to know the function of the behavior so that you don't strengthen it, but weaken it. So this is where this is where the different views of the student themselves might say, well, you know what? I really can't do geometry, so I'm going to do whatever I can to get out of it. So this is why you need multiple eyes, multiple voices.
Mm-hmm. And that will also allow us to think about okay, so escape is what the student really wanted. What is an appropriate way to gain time away to regroup or whatever, that need is, that time away, escaping. What's an appropriate way and time to do that for the student so that they can begin to learn that, you can't dodge everything. There are going to be things that you have to address that are uncomfortable or hard. So the skill we want to teach is what do I need to do to take care of myself in those moments that's not self-destructive. Okay.
Right. And the other thing too is if you're teaching to kind of look at yourself, actually, if you are going to make students read, everybody reads a paragraph and you go through the class one after the other. If you know this student can't read, they will figure out a way to get out of reading, which may interrupt the flow of the class. But so if you consider that, talk to the student, make a plan, whatever it is, to allow that student to be comfortable in the class, to stay and learn, that also will help with the behavior.
So here's the general process that you would use for functional behavior assessment. You're going to identify areas of concern in as specific terms as possible. We're going to narrow down those concerns. You know, what is the real focus? Review any existing data that we have, and then determine if we need additional information. We'd collect that additional information, that additional data, and then this is the piece that really includes the whole group. That step number 6, which says analyze the data and create the hypothesis of the function of that behavior. That's when you want to have multiple perspectives, people that have worked with the student in different ways and had successes and failures in different ways with the student, and that know the student's strengths as well as some of their weaknesses, so that we can create a hypothesis, which is our best professional guesstimation based on the data that we have for the why this behavior, why does he do this? Why does he get up and dance, you know, in the middle of class? He knows he's going to get in trouble for it. Okay, well, because that desire to escape is pretty strong. And I'll do anything to be away from here. You know, that's how we roll. You know, I've got students I've worked with. Do you know that spitting is a very effective way to be left alone? You know, it is. Think about it. Who wants to be close to somebody that's spitting? If you want to be left alone, that's a very effective way. It's not what we want kids doing at school. It's not what I don't want to sit beside the person that, you know, wants to be alone, who's spitting. But it's a very effective way to get what you need in the moment pretty quickly. We need to, through our behavioral plan that we develop, come up with something that's just as effective, that meets that need for escape, but doesn't hurt anybody, doesn't get anyone in trouble, and so on. You know, that's why we want to take this time to dig into why this behavior, so that we can teach a new skill.
And we know that this sounds like it would take a lot of time. It might, but also if you need to do it faster because the kid has a very severe behavior problem, the process is still the same. You still have to do all the steps.
And so we create that hypothesis. Sometimes we have to collect more information. Sometimes we have what we need.
So
And
here
then,
is
yeah.
just examples of data that can be collected. I don't know, anybody have any other ones? The nurse always has good information. Obviously, usually most schools have some sort of office referrals, attendance. Teachers, again, observations, things that you've done in class, talk to the parent, the student, other teachers. Any information that you could get. Reinforcement, what worked last year, what didn't work. Just any information that you can get. And again, here are some ways to collect the data. But
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be, it can be just Post-it notes that you have jotted things down. Yes, at some point you're going to have to make them a little prettier, but you can keep however is comfortable for you to keep it.
Someone's asking about recommendations for rating scales. There's nothing that comes to mind at this time. It depends on what tools you're comfortable with, and and if it gives you the information that you, grade level.
Right.
But I don't have any in particular. And I was checking the chat there. Someone else missed the code again, the QR code, but the Padlet link is here at the bottom of the screen now. Padlet.com.
And we have it again at the end.
Yes, IEPTA/developing BIPT, if that's helpful. Yeah. And if there's some rating scales that some of you have worked with that for different age levels, actually would be kind of nice to have.
Yeah, and if you find something that really works and you send it our way, we can add it to the Padlet. So that way it can be shared with other people. If you find
Mm.
something that really works.
So yes, Shannon,
Here's
if you
some more.
find some, if you find
Yeah.
something, let us know.
Yeah. Okay, so, oh, we already did these.
Yeah, we talked about data.
Okay, so,
I have a question.
Okay.
Real on that slide that you just had up with those pictures of things, was it the data or
Yes,
the
data.
do you have copies of those?
You can actually when you go to the Padlet, you can download each one of these documents.
Okay, so these are on the Padlet.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's much more, but there is a column that says data dive. And these tools in particular are there as well as others.
And then while I have you, do you guys have a ABC data sheet that's kind of general that teachers can use?
I don't have a general one.
Because I don't know how we're getting the function of the behavior without collecting ABC data. The only way I can figure out how to get a function of behavior is through ABC data. I mean, you're not going to get it in frequency count. So I didn't know if there was some, like if I do one for a student, it's very particularly written for that student. But I'm looking for something I can give general ed teachers to do.
Let me think about that.
Have a conversation with them with.
Okay, so user-friendly ABC charts for general ed staff. Yeah,
Yes, because we're trying to have because gen ed staff do behavior plans before they're referred for special education.
And so they're creating a behavior intervention plan?
They create they complete school-based behavior plans. I would not say they are what you are talking about. You know, they're not doing true FBAs and writing behavior intervention plans. But this, as part of those MTS process.
Oh yeah. It's kind of like a behavior contract almost is what more closer to that than to am I describing that correctly?
But schools call them behavior plans. And teachers call them behavior plans, but they've kind of missed the steps along the way. And then when they get referred for special ed, and we said, okay, you're going to do a behavior, FBA behavior plan, the teachers, they're like, well, I already did one.
Well, no, there's a difference between a behavior plan and a behavior intervention plan where we're teaching skills. And even using the language is probably confusing.
Yeah.
That's just trying another strategy, behavioral strategy. But
because even at that, teachers should be teaching behavior in class. I mean, it should I don't know what their behavior plans look like, but I mean, every teacher should be teaching behavior all the time.
Expectations, behavioral
expectations and what is expected and
in tier 1, because that's all tier 1. So when a student is struggling in tier 1, usually the first step for a classroom teacher is to take it to that student support team in the school building. And then that team, if they see a problem, that team at the school building level ends up creating behavior plans. It's just hard because they end up calling them the same thing we do on the special ed.
Well, and that I don't know that we can change that, but as far as what people are going to call it, but the difference is a functional behavior assessment has to be a part of a behavioral intervention plan, and we can create one for a student who does not have an IEP. It's intensive, as we know, and it's very thorough. That's why we do it when we need to do it for students with those needs. But they're not really the same thing, and behavior supports. Maybe different language being introduced would be helpful, but you can always clarify it in that this is what's driven by Article 7 for students with IEPs. The same process can be used for any student, for anyone, but it has to be a part of the process for a student with an IEP.
Right.
Yeah. So
it's just we come across
and that's not to say that's not to say that individual teachers could have difficulty with a student that doesn't go across, that's unique to
Settings,
that individual teacher, which doesn't make the behaviors any less difficult for that teacher. But then that's where like classroom management or those kinds of things might come into play if it's not across settings.
Mhm. Well, and then you can also look at all the other types of intervening that we can do with looking at instruction and looking at the the flow of the class and how the classroom management plan is designed. And I mean, those aren't pieces that are specifically held to students with IEPs. And maybe it's about delivery of the instruction and in the curriculum that you have. There's so many other variables. What we're trying to do.
I was just trying to help these schools that are working on behavior problems that for non-special ed students.
Well, you can use the same process for a
Yeah.
student that if
Yeah,
it's
when we go ahead.
Yeah,
I
it's
say-
just I'm not involved in those usually. I came across it that the school is needing some support, but
Mhm.
my job is when the student is a special ed student.
Right.
So these schools are doing this. The school is doing this on their own. And it's just trying to give them a little guidance.
Right. Well,
I'm not
this part, the
You can use
process
this-
can work
yeah.
for anybody, but as we go through the behavior intervention plan piece, you also might be able to figure out some things to help them
okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
with the plan piece of it.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Sounds great. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Does anybody else have a question? That's a good question, Shannon. Thanks. All right.
I'm not seeing anything else.
So here is our hypothesis. When something happens, Sammy is likely to do what to gain or avoid what. Now, if you do this and you have more than one, keep them. Again, that's existing data.
If you have more than one hypothesis.
Or if you're not sure, keep one so you can have it so you save yourself some work.
And you may well have more. That's the beauty of having a diverse team, bringing their own perspectives, from their professional skill sets. That way, you've got several combinations or several ideas that if we don't get any progress in changing this behavior based on the hypothesis that we've determined, we can move to another one and say, okay, let's try this. Maybe this could be. Let's look at this a little differently. And it gives you more opportunity to continue to try to figure out what's going on without starting the process all over again.
Right. Which we don't ever want to do. All right. So we're going to build a plan. You have your functional behavior assessment. Now we're going to build a plan. Remember, our plan is based on the fact that a student is missing a skill. This isn't a plan built on, okay, reward and punishment. This is about finding a skill to help a student learn behavior, just like you would math or reading or any other subject. Again, for all of those of you that love Article 7, here is Article 7 Behavior Intervention Plan defined. Whoops. It's going to be in the case conference. It's committee devised. And I'm not going to read this to you because everybody can read it themselves.
Yeah, the biggest piece is that we're maximizing consistency of implementation of this plan that we create across people and settings in which the student is involved. And that's usually where the plan falls apart, because all the people that need to know don't typically know about the plan or what their role in the plan is. So that's an important piece, that consistency.
Right. So as a person as I used to do all of my case conferences when I was the principal, find a way, if you're that person in the case conference, the teacher of record or the PAR, to ensure that everybody that needs to know knows, because I've seen some great behavior plans completed and people don't tell anybody. So you need to make sure that the people that need to know. So again, Article 7, we do a plan if we determine that the behavior of the student is impeding their learning or the learning of others. We do it if there's a manifestation or disciplinary change of placement. And the most important one is being sure that when a student comes in, when you have a move-in, if they have a behavior plan, that somebody is tasked with reviewing it very carefully. Because people put stuff in. I think Alisa didn't you have one that they required you to build a room?
Yeah, we're going to build a timeout room in the classroom for them. That didn't happen. We did some other things instead, but if we had not caught that in the IEP and had a discussion around it and made a decision, we would have owned that, that in our district as well. So
yeah, so be sure that you have somebody that looks over any move-in behavior plans. So when you're creating, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say there's a couple of suggestions in the chat about the FAST form and some other things that
good.
We'll have to take a look at. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So the whole idea of a behavior intervention plan is you're going to find a replacement behavior. And because it's a goal, you're going to provide that specially designed instruction. How are you going to teach the students a replacement for whatever their behavior is? Whether that might be accommodations, whether that might be environmental supports. And again, I can't stress enough how important it is to teach kids behavior all the time. I mean, it's a school setting. It's different than other settings. And kids need to understand and have expectations that there are certain behavior, just like we have expectations for going to church or going to a movie as going to the theater. There are different expectations. And students don't always know alternatives. I would say that even if parents are functional in the workplace, that doesn't mean that they don't solve problems inappropriately at home. That wouldn't be a good way to solve problems at school. So we always have to be teaching students behavior. And again, because it's an IEP and because it's a goal, it has to have specially designed instruction. Somebody, whoever the best person is in the school, it has to be able to teach the student a new behavior, a replacement behavior. Most students with behaviors have more than one. And I really like this slide because you have to think about, for a student with a behavior issue, if you could just change one thing, or if you could just teach a student one thing, what would it be that would be life-changing? And if you could just teach them problem solving, then maybe the I can do it would also be solved. Maybe conflict resolution. So think about what would be life-changing. Do you have anything to add, Alisa?
No, it's just that it's just that important, that because we can't do everything. What would be the one piece that could move the student further along so that they could then be ready for the next piece of learning?
Right. So, yeah. I'm sure there's other things, but think about the kids that you have. What would you say, if I could just get the student to do this, I think everything would change?
No, it's no different than, if I can just get Jimmy from the door of the bus to the door of the building without an incident, the day goes so much better. So how do we, what do we do to work on that skill? What are we going to do differently? What are we going to help him learn to be able to do? And for some
Right, and
kids, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, thinking about, students in class, if he would just ask a question about his work so that he could get started on it. There are a lot of sub skills in asking a question. That would be the specially designed instruction. You've got to recognize you have a question. Is it on topic? Is this a good time to ask? Who do I ask? That's 4 skills right there before we're even to the question. We can use our specially designed instruction to really have an impact on what comes next for our learners. And behaviorally, it's the same way. If I can get him to start thinking about his own thinking and that change that self-efficacy piece, I can do this. I've got skills. I can do this. You know how far a kid can move on their own if they believe they can do something? And we've got kiddos that need that skill, and it can be life-changing. And it may not take all of the problems off the table, but it's a start, and success builds success.
Right, and I have seen behaviors that students that won't come in the building, and they still have math and language art schools, and really you only have one. How are you going to get that kid in the seat? Because maybe once you get him in the seat, they're hooked, but you have to get them in the seat. So how do you do that? Whether it's their fear of not being able to do it, who knows what? Getting them into the seat might solve all the rest of the problems.
And if you have an opportunity to take a look at the book, Leanne Jones' work is very good. Your students, my students, our students.
Right. It is good. Okay, so specially designed instruction is what all the special ed teachers here do for every goal that they do. How are you going to meet the unique needs of this student in order to teach them a replacement behavior? What does a student need that special education can provide?
In this document, it's been out a few years. The Department of Education here in Indiana developed it, and it's quite good. A one-pager, or maybe it's front and back, just describing what SDI is and can be or could be.
Right, because there may be more than one kid that won't come in the building, but how you get them to come into the building might be different for each person, each individual student. How you navigate that will be different. So it's how you're going to reach that individual student.
And these next few slides are just some kind of resource pieces that if we were spending the day together, we might circle back to them and use them in some of the other examples that we have. This clarifies accommodations. And I always think of accommodations, as I would talk with kids about it and say, it's same outcome, different path. So, the expectations at the end are going to be the same as everyone else. We may take a different route to get there, and that means it might be other supports and things that allow you to learn as well. The accommodations of time and input, levels of support. Levels of support can be anything from eyes on somebody silently to, assisting them with all of their weight and anything in between, in an activity or a task. Right. But these are nice to have to maybe share with your general ed colleagues too when we talk about environmental supports. What's going to support, maybe be critical for one student, but beneficial to a lot of kids. Understanding elapsed time. How many times you get asked, is it time to do something else? Yeah, is it time to do? Is it time? Maybe put that back in a student's hands and say, this is how we're going to capture the time that's passing. There's a middle school somewhere in Southern Indiana that has this brilliant setup in their first. It's the first class of the morning that it's a math course in the middle school. I'm not sure I could do that myself, but they've got the room set up so that their cafe tables are on the outside edge of the more traditional structure of the classroom in the middle. And when they're working, students can actually request a reservation to work at one of the tables. And there's one table that's always available on an emergency basis. What a great way to help young people kind of, how am I doing today this morning? Am I ready to learn? If I need a little extra boost, I can go and check in at this table and stand instead of sit. And so now I can focus more on the learning that I have to do. And that's encouraging kids to own their own what they need and ask for it. But
Right, and some of these things, like just teaching kids how to calm, everybody needs to calm themselves sometimes. So how do you teach kids how to do that in an appropriate way? What is appropriate for kindergartner might not be the same thing that is appropriate for a ninth grader, but nonetheless, it's just as important. The same with fidgets. What a kindergartner or first elementary school kid might use is different than what a high school student might use. But just teaching them how to do those things appropriately.
Appropriate for the setting.
Yeah.
Appropriate for the setting.
Right.
Where we are. Because I can't spread it across all of life, but I can say, in my classroom, in this building that we share together, in this place of learning, this is the expectation. It may be different outside.
Right.
So the whole idea is that we want to create a plan that is going to provide us with our best understanding of the function-based replacement behaviors that we want the student to learn. And we're going to do that by implementing any interventions that are appropriate to the situation and the student, monitoring with fidelity of instruction, or the fidelity of instruction. Okay, is it happening like we said we would? And if someone's got a great way to monitor fidelity of instruction and could share that out with us, a lot of people would be happy, because that's one of the questions that I get sometimes from folks. And then documenting and reporting progress. We've got to be able to have the information in front of us to know whether or not the student is being successful, to know whether we need to change what we're doing, and to report out to the family as we're required to do by law. But it's everything that we do, every strand that we address should track back to the function-based information that we now have about this student, so that we're matching the why.
And when you're checking and you think it's not working, check that fidelity. Make sure that it is whatever you're putting into place is being done everywhere, whether that's where the child sits. If he needs to sit in the front, then in every class, are they sitting in the front? So making sure that the adults are doing it with fidelity would be your first step in checking. And again, documenting, because you need that data, like anything else.
Yeah, we do have some documents that we can share. They're also on the Padlet. But if you go to the next slide, it talks about instructional roles and responsibilities. Whoops! Oh, did you take that slide out of there? Nope. Back up. You're going to.
Oh no.
You must have.
I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay, because I'll just mention that. But it really is important that we make sure that we've got to indicate who's going to be responsible for letting the rest of the 5th grade team know that this is what's going to happen with the student after recess time. Okay, who's going to be the one that's actually going to do the face-to-face skill building and instructional piece of this? Who's going to? It doesn't have to be all the teacher of record. In this day and time of MTSS, we have been able to, in many places, identify who is really a master at teaching certain skills. And we want to, in some of the buildings I've been in, at least, we wanted to put that student in front of that individual that could teach that skill, so that we know the student got that skill. And we could do that. We would sometimes it would make our schedule a little bit wonky, but we wanted to make sure that that student had every opportunity to receive instruction from somebody that was a master at it. And then, we take that skill and we grow them with it. So that might be someone that's involved in the IEP identifies this individual for, this amount of time for this reason. And we can do that. We want to make sure that we keep the information updated, and particularly in an IEP when kids move around a lot. But what's the skill set that this individual had that's so important that they're able to work with the student and teach them that skill as well? We've got to make sure that we're documenting everything that we do, that we're collecting the data that we need to have, and that we set a schedule for reviewing the data. It has to be on the calendar. We have to do that. Otherwise, it's never going to happen. We've got too many moving parts.
And that's why when collecting the data, you have to be clear about what you're looking for, that observable, measurable, and what's the third one? Observable, measurable, and
Recognizable.
recognizable. Everybody has to recognize the same thing and collect data on the same thing, regardless of where the student is.
If we were
that's why
together,
it's really clear.
If we were together in one space, I would give you an example of a student that I worked with that howled like a wolf in class, and we were trying to break that cycle of, this is not the time or the place. And so we had to make sure that everybody knew what it looked like and sounded like, and I can do it really well. I'm not going to do it now. It wouldn't be recorded, but everybody could recognize it when it happened, and that was critical, because if we're going to eliminate a behavior, we had to work really hard with that student, and everybody had to be in lockstep. Okay, how do we do that with all the moving parts that we have?
Right.
We document everything in the plan that we're doing, and there's got to be the teacher of record or whoever else is assigned to be the keeper of that information. But everybody that's on the team probably has a task or something that needs to be addressed that they're doing to support this. And
yeah, I would say that somebody have a question? I would say that the teacher of record probably wants to be the one that actually puts it into the IEP, because you don't want a lot of people in there, but that doesn't mean that other people can't collect the data for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if the student is not making progress, you have to check the fidelity, first of all. Is everybody doing it? Is everybody observing and measuring or collecting documentation on the same thing? We need to adjust the plan then. If the student isn't making any progress, we have to figure out what we're going to tweak. If they're making progress, then just keep doing what you're doing. Continue to monitor and keep doing what you're doing. If they reach mastery and they can generalize it, then darn, discontinue it, celebrate, have a party. I think too often with behavior plans, it's like never ending. You have a behavior plan forever. But if it's a goal-based, you should be able to make progress and eventually master the goal, which would mean kids need to know, that success builds on success. Just knowing you've made a goal could be life-changing for a kid. Look, I did it. I did it. I can keep going. I'm good. So I think that sometimes this piece is missing. So like any other goal, you have to determine whether you're not making progress, whether you're making progress, or whether you've reached the goal. Does anybody have any questions?
I was going back and looking through the chat. There was a question about a tool, and hopefully, Cassandra, I hope I'm saying that correctly. You mentioned a tool called PRIM, PRIM, and there were some questions about it for Tier 1 interventions.
Yes.
What
You may
can you
not be
tell
able to
us?
see me. Hope you can hear me. So,
Yeah, we can hear you.
um,
That's great.
great. Yeah. So the Prim manual, if you remember the old Prim manual, they're ancient, or I feel like they're ancient. But so as a behavior consultant, when teachers need interventions to just try and be able to track data, they give me the behaviors they're most concerned about. You can go to the index in this thing and it will give you 15 pages that have, and it literally is just a book of interventions is all it
Hmm.
is. So, but it, so if you have a student, like you said, that was having a hard time coming into the building off the bus, or there was an incident always off the bus, you could go into there and look up bus conduct or look up, if it's hitting someone on the way in from the bus or horseplay, whatever it may be, you look for that specific thing. And then you can go to all those different pages and see which one applies the most to your situation. So at the top, it'll have like in boldface, it'll have words that say like, the student will repeatedly jump on people's backs or kick and trip
Mhm.
people on the way into the building. And
So it's
then you're
pretty
like,
specific,
yes.
but
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like, yes, that's my student. So then I'm going to give you 101 things to try. And
Huh.
it will give you hundreds of things for that one behavior.
Why do I not know about the?
I don't know. It sounds,
Yeah. Do you
I
know
call
who
it behavior
publishes
intervention
it?
Bible. So
so does it give you, so it gives you,
It's amazing. I'm from Greenfield
Structure?
Central,
Mhm.
and I remember that book, which maybe that ages me, but I
That's
mean,
okay.
literally everything was in there. It's a red cover with
Oh,
like
yeah.
yellow or cream writing on it. I totally remember it. Yep, I've used.
There's a link somebody just put in to the book or
Yeah.
free referral.
but
So a lot
again,
of times that's what we'll use for our gen ed, because
Mhm.
sometimes they're not specific enough for the actual behavior plan. This is just the things they're going to try and track data
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
before it
right.
gets to that point. So
So it's kind of that for like making them aware and try this and document it, giving them
Yes.
ideas before
Mhm.
you come to this where you have to be
Okay.
more
You know
specific.
what? Yeah. Pre-referral interview. Yes. I do. I recognize the cover.
yes.
Pre-referral intervention manual. Yes. 4th edition. 2014.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, like I had one teacher that reached out. She's like, this is what we're seeing. And I'm like, okay, let me throw these at you. I literally just took pictures of the pages with all of the interventions and
Mhm.
emailed them to her. And I said, pick one or two of these to try, keep your data and see what happens. So,
See,
Oh,
and
I like that
that's
you added
exactly
keep your data so that you know what you've done and what you haven't.
yeah.
and that way, you also feel like you're giving, you're giving someone something to try and do that could very well be part of the change. And
Right.
it's doable. I mean, it's like just, do this one piece.
And sometimes it's life-changing for the teacher. If they could
Yeah.
just do something and it's successful, it just becomes a part of what they do and it stops problems in the future.
Mhm. Well, and it does, there is that idea that, you got special training to do this work. So there must be, there's something more than, a teacher, and that's not necessarily the truth, that
No, I would say
sometimes
teachers,
we know what to do, innately at times with kids, and it's just, is that okay to do? Is that my role to do it? And
sometimes they do, I would say teachers do a lot of things just in every day. And I like that idea of just giving them something. Some of them, they probably say, well, I already do that. And then it's just
well, let's try something else. Let's
try something else, but I'm glad you tell them to keep the data because that has to help in the end if they need it, if you've got that data.
Well, and I always try to tell them too, to pick something that they can do that just fits into the natural flow of what's
Yes.
happening.
Yes.
Because if it's too outside the box, then they should have probably had a behavior plan, intervention plan, and an FBA done. So
Yeah, well, that's a good point too. That
Yeah.
And at least,
And sometimes it helps more than one kid. So like I said, sometimes just changing something up for the teacher can change a lot.
yeah, and,
Give them
and
a
that
little
could change
confidence.
and that changes the environment. And that might be just enough to make a difference for a kiddo.
Yeah, so I'm sure some of these things in this managing surface behaviors, which is in the Padlet,
Yeah, those.
teachers just do automatically. I mean,
Mhm.
proximity control, lots of teachers do that.
Mhm.
Just standing near students will stop behaviors.
Your presence.
Or sometimes signal, like this is another thing that can be depends on how old you are. How you signal teachers that you need something. A high schooler might put their pencil or put their computer screen part way down or something, as opposed to a little kid that might have a yellow card on their desk or something.
That they turn over. Mhm.
Yeah.
The other piece, the other resource that's on the screen is a little more complex. The triage chart. Has anybody had any experiences using a triage chart for a student, an individual student? Particularly at the secondary level, where kids are moving between different teachers. You use the cycle of escalation, and this chart is in the resources that we have on the Padlet.
It's near the bottom.
You use the cycle of escalation, and you start with the calm, and you describe what the student's behavior is like and what the student sounds like if they were speaking to you. And then further along that same line, it'll say, and here's some tips on how to best instruct this student and how you might say those things, say and do those things. And then it moves from the calm to the student has a trigger. It identifies the triggers for the student and then gives some information about this is what it looks like when the student has been triggered. This is what you do as an instructor when you see that happening. And this is how you do it. And it goes all the way through that cycle until you get to the debrief on the other side. And it's a nice tool to be able, it's very labor intensive, but if you've got a student who needs that kind of support around them and they're not in one classroom all day long, they do see multiple people, it might be worth developing. This was from a team in, I want to say Michigan that I met that had put this together. But just a tool to pass along, and it might be beneficial. It may be way too much, for some places, but if you've got a student who's mobile and the student understands and knows about it too, it's not like we're doing this to them. These are things that your teacher in fourth period is going to do to help support you if you feel like you're at the end of the line with your patients. These are the words that you're going to hear. And Gail, you talk about the language that you gave teachers.
Yes. Sometimes I found when I was teaching students in the middle school, and I'm old enough to have had a self-contained class, and now I tried to get them out. Sometimes because behaviors can be so emotional. A student is talking back, it's just emotional. And middle school kids sometimes are big, and teachers are like, oh, I don't want this to escalate. So what I would do is I would talk with the student about it, but I had like just index cards, and I had something on there that the teacher could say to the student. If they felt like something was escalating or they felt like they weren't going to say the right thing and the student wasn't going to respond well. And that way it took kind of the emotionality out of it, and it just gave them something to say. And the student now knew that that's what the teacher was going to do. And it was very successful. It just could be a sentence like, okay, we'll talk about it after class. Or you're upset. I can't even think, it's been so long since I did them, but they were like, you're upset. Why don't you take 5 or something? There was something different for each student that I needed to do it for, but the teachers felt like it helped because they didn't have to think, what am I going to do now, this kid? Pardon? So, yeah. And it just helped. It just helped. Teachers kept them in their pockets, they said, or they would have them on the desk, and sometimes they'd have to rush back to their desk and grab the card just to be able to read it to the student. But it helped with that emotionality of the behaviors.
Mhm.
It wasn't as detailed as the triage chart that is on here. It was just a small piece of it. It just helped. Does anybody have any questions?
There was a question about how likely, or when do you review the functional behavior assessment? And the data would dictate that in some ways. When you need to, if things are going well, you certainly want to report that out. If things aren't going well, you're going to meet even more often, probably. And it would also be something that you would address during the annual case review too, because that's when you're looking at all of the skills, all of the entire educational world of the student. So that would be a time to do that as well, the behavioral piece.
Well, and also as you have to report out every reporting period, whatever your school is, however long that is. But as you if you're good at putting the data, collecting the data, then you should be noticing trends, whether it's working, whether it's not. Maybe it's working, some places not, so that then you might have to rethink it before your annual. You should just always be reviewing it, tweaking it if you need to.
And if you have, nobody in the group now will do this, but I have seen IEP documents where there was one dot on each grading period. If there's only one dot, we haven't moved anywhere yet, in that grading period. So we need a little more information to be able to, to know whether it's working or not.
You need at least four points to start a trend line.
Yep.
So it's inherent that and again, teachers of record, don't feel like you may have to put it into the IEP system, but don't feel like you're the only one that can collect the information.
Yeah.
So if it's having a para collect information at the start of period 3 or whatever it is, don't feel like you are the only one that has to collect the data.
Yeah.
Just be sure that the people that are collecting it know what they're collecting.
Teaching is not an individual sport.
No.
Okay, you've got it, and particularly when we're trying to teach behavioral skills, the more we can wrap around a student, it cannot be one person.
And include the students. Often we do IEPs. It's like a document that the adults do, and we're going to do this to the kids. But we need to include them in their goals. This is what you're working on. This is what we're going to do. Have them, they can keep track of data too.
That was some of the best at the secondary level. Some of the best interventions we found were most effective was when the student was keeping data and we were keeping data, and then we'd have these little meetings in the middle, and the student would talk about what they saw, and we talk about what we saw, and it kept everybody accountable to the process. But kids kind of, when things start to get better, they notice that too.
Right, and when I was doing it, I had one year I had this system was complicated, but it was bar graphs, and the kids colored in the bar graphs and kept track until they thought it was just fun, until one of them said, oh, this is like math class. We do this in math, bar graphs, but they liked it because they could see progress. And so that helped a lot. They were competitive. They wanted to show more progress. So if you can include them, they know they have behaviors. So it helps to even small children you can include in their goals.
Yep. That little munchkin up north that said, I'm trying to make my line go up. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Doesn't matter if she didn't understand anything else about the process. She was trying to get better at something, and she was.
Yeah. Praise always works.
Yeah.
Okay, so here again is the Padlet, and the longer version of our training is also in the Padlet. If you want to see the examples that and activities that we would have had you do if we had longer, are in the Padlet.
Mhm. And we wouldn't be doing them online. If we do them face to face.
So does anybody have any questions? You guys
Oh,
have had
Michelle.
some great questions
Yeah,
and
I've
some
tried to
good
go back.
resources.
Hi everyone, I have a question.
Hi,
Hi, Alyssa. My name is Ivy Wilcher. I am a high school resource teacher, and I have a question about students who have the ED disability category. Should we automatically assume that that student needs a BIP written for them?
You know, I wouldn't automatically assume anything, and, you know, find out more about the student. You know, what does the student share about, you know, their past,
Well,
you know,
and
school
also,
experiences.
but they have had a functional behavior assessment as part of being identified as that. So that will give you information also.
Yeah,
So
but just,
the reason-
but just because it's, go ahead.
Okay, the reason why I'm asking is because recently, I had a high school freshman has a history of getting suspended and expelled for explosive behavior. She has a primary disability category of specific learning, but since I've met her, she has a challenging time regulating herself when she's in conflict with other students, and she explodes verbally and physically. So I've been seeing the behavior escalate, and at this point it's been decided that she maybe should get reevaluated to learn if there's more going on with her. And that's the route we're taking. So me as the resource teacher, and she's on my caseload, I'm asking myself, well, once we get these results back, should we be moving on to a BIP, or should we be trying to write a BIP now or FBA now?
Well, if
You can write a behavior plan. You can write a behavior plan for any student.
yeah, any student can have a behavior plan. And if you're looking for the area of disability that already includes the FBA piece, you'll have that data. I mean, you'll have that information to use to create a plan. Now, if you're, you know, but again, this is about teaching skills. If you're talking about keeping people safe, that's a crisis plan. If you know, if you're teaching a skill so the student can manage their anger differently, that's a skill we can teach. So, you know, I'm not trying to say don't create a plan, but just understanding the difference between a crisis plan. If you've got an explosive student, you still want to teach some skills, and you know, that could be your behavior intervention plan, but you might still need to have a crisis plan as skills are learned, or, you know, but that would be a conversation for, you know, the people that know her best, and, you know, your team.
Like her. Yeah, because I think what's been happening is we decided she hasn't been receiving any social work service or seeing a social worker. So we kind of wanted to explore her just seeing a social worker for a little while to see if that improves anything before we establish like a FBA BIP in addition to the revamp. So it's like we wanted to take some different avenues first before writing the FBA. Was that a good route?
Yeah, you're still, either way, you're getting more information, and your focus is on keeping the student safe. If you're in the process and it's not complete, you know, you're not ignoring it, is I guess what I'm saying. You're not, you know, ignoring it at all.
And to Shannon's question, Article 7, you have, if you're looking for that disability, like Ivy was talking about, the student has a different one, but if you're looking for,
if you suspect an emotional disability,
you have to do an FBA.
Yeah, that's part of the evaluation process. But every student that has that diagnosis doesn't have a behavior intervention. They don't have to have one. If they don't need one, they don't, but you go through that process to determine, what.
But they
whether the
do have
skills
to
you
have
need
an FBA to be identified as a student.
That's
with a
part of the
emotional-
evaluation, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Does that answer your question, Shannon?
It's like clear as mud.
Ivy, did we answer your question?
Yeah, just don't. The BIP FBA language is a very touchy topic in the schools because it's not a band-aid. Like that's something I learned. It's not like a magic wand. When you create and start this process, it's like you have to see it through and work with your team. I heard someone say that teaching isn't like just a one person's job. It's a team thing. And I do realize that writing this BIP and FBA, it doesn't magically, the behavior is not
Well,
teaches everyone in the
lost sound.
school how it teaches everyone in the school like how to manage this, help this student manage their behavior. And then teach the student also like how to self-regulate. Am I on track with that?
Did you hear all that? I didn't hear all of her.
I didn't
of your
quite hear all of
response.
it, but yes, I
Yeah, it
do
was kinda-
believe from what I heard, yes.
Yeah, you were kind of going in and out on my end. I'm sorry.
But yeah, yes.
Thank
Yeah.
But
you.
yeah,
I think a call came in or something and it tapped out the audio, but I appreciate you guys for just sharing your wisdom with us.
well, thank
Oh,
you for
thank
being
you.
here, and it's really the wisdom of the group, the people around
Right.
you who are, who are working with you. And you guys are all working in the same direction, different students, but trying to move them towards something more positive behaviorally. And we
Okay,
appreciate
so
that.
on this last screen, you have two scan these. One on the right would be the for other workshops or events that will take you to those. And our new catalog will be coming out soon with new trainings. And the other one, if you would go in and do an evaluation on this afternoon's session for Alisa and I, that would be much appreciated. You will be getting, probably tomorrow, you will be getting a certificate for the time that you spent with us today. So look for that in an email tomorrow. You will also get a recording of this that you can also use. So yeah, so give us a eval. That would be
Yeah, and
greatly
please let us know
appreciated.
what you need, what information is helpful to you.
Or what maybe we could add that you feel is missing.
Absolutely. Because we're going to be taking a look at all of our trainings, and it's just time to reevaluate what we're doing and if it's meaningful and what you need. So thank you. Thank you.
So does anybody else have anything? If not, let me see. I don't think there's anything else in the chat. So no. All right. Well, everybody, since it's almost 5:30, enjoy the rest of your evening.
Right now.
Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we appreciate your time. So have a good one.
Thanks.
Bye.